welcome Jessica Gallegos once again to Mortgage Ballers. Jessica, thank you for joining us today. I think it'd be a good opportunity for us to discuss what is the current state of the real estate and mortgage market.
Sounds like a good plan. It's definitely been a slower fall. I think election years always make it a little bit different, right? But we did see that rate cut last week. When was that? Last Wednesday?
Yeah, it was on the 18th. We had the Fed rate cut. I believe it was the 18th. The rates 50 basis points. Now it's really important. I've talked about this a lot on social media. They cut the overnight rate. Okay, that's not the actual mortgage rates, and that's how it always has been. People just assume it's the same thing. Oh, the Fed cuts the overnight rate. That means my mortgage rates go down by that amount. It's not how it works. That overnight rate is the rate that banks charge each other for trading overnight, basically for selling money between each other.
And that can get kind of confusing for the buyers as well, because I know a lot of people ask me questions, which then I refer again to you with those sort of lending questions. But when the rate did get cut, I did see a little bit higher activity, maybe showing wise on some of my listings. Still not where I would like it to be, but I feel like it did help some people, get off the fence maybe a little bit. But
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. I know my phone, my phone's been ringing a lot for people looking at refinances. Anybody who bought a home in the last maybe 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years, they're sitting in that 6, 7, 8 range on the rates. So, and the loan amounts are pretty high comparatively speaking. So, when we're talking about a refinance, we're talking about lowering those payments by anywhere from, I don't know, $200 a month, maybe up to maybe 400 or 500 bucks a month, coupled with inflation and everybody's bank accounts getting depleted with the way the world has been. I think a lot of people are eager to start saving money. So our phone has been ringing, but I want to know how that has translated over to Northern Colorado with the market. I know you have several listings, I think, right now, and I know you have a bunch of borrowers you're working with. Let's talk about some things that are standing out as we look back or as we look at the end of the month of September. What are you seeing?
so I feel like I'm seeing people that are thinking about listing. I'm starting to get a lot of people that are thinking about listing in the spring, February. Went on a few listing appointments that will be listing after the first of the year. I feel like everyone's trying to wait to see what happens after the election and then into 2025. So I have a lot of listings that are waiting until the spring. So beware. I have a feeling this spring is going to get really busy. So I'm kind of telling my buyers now that are on the fence, now might be a great time because we can still negotiate some things as far as concessions, inspection items. Because if it gets, you know, per se crazier next year, what we're going to see is the prices start to rise, and then you're in the multiple offer situation again.
Let me follow up with you on that. So listings right now are they steady compared like as far as like from January to now? Where are we right now with people wanting to list their homes, would you say?
I feel like if you have to move right now, if there's something pressing that people are listing, but I feel like the majority of people are trying to wait a little bit. I do feel like if you list now, you need to be spot on with price. You can't overprice your home. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of people want to list a little bit higher, but and then they'll say, well, then we can just price reduce in a couple weeks. But I would say, don't do that. Just price right from the beginning.
What happens when you do that? Just from a because I've sold a lot of homes in my life. The natural tendency for a homeowner is, oh, this house is gorgeous. Like it's worth so much more. Don't you lowball me just to sell it quickly. But what happens when you go in too high on a listing? Like what's like the worst thing that could happen when you do that?
So you sit and sit, and after 10 to 14 days, I tell people you're not going to get a full price offer, most likely. Um, and then you sit for so long, and then people are starting to wonder, well, is there something wrong with it? And then you get buried under all the other houses. You're not fresh on the market. You're stale. So people, yeah, most people are thinking, is there something wrong with it? Why has it been sitting? Or then they do see it and then they go in and then they really, kind of undercut you on price or try to lowball the offer, which if you would just come out on that first weekend with a great price, you'd get so many more people and so much more
And it,
activity.
and it really wouldn't have been a low ball offer because your number would have been more maybe close. Do
Yeah.
you ever get people that come back to you after they insist on a ridiculously high sales price and then kind of almost blame you and say, well, we didn't know. Like, why did you let us come in so high? Does that ever happen? Or are you pretty, I know you're, and let me just add here real quick. I know that with the people that I know that I refer to you, or they say you do a really good job setting expectations.
Yeah.
You got it's a fine line, right? Like you can't oversell it. You can't promise the moon, right? You got to be cautious. How do you handle that part of it?
Well, that can happen. I know people get frustrated. I've sold houses where it's that, and I was frustrated. And then you tend to blame the agent because who else are you going to blame, right? So I try to, set the expectations up front and just let them know, this is the price I would suggest. And if you don't want to do that and go with what you want to do, then you can try it. But, I kind of put in an email stating this is what I would suggest for price, and then being, kind of come back and just say, well, this is kind of what I suggest at the beginning, but we wanted to try higher, so here we are. But I feel like most people are quick to blame the agent, but we have a conversation, right? And I can only do the best I can with marketing and trying to push things out. But
And one other thing I want to add here, Jess, is what I noticed that you do is, and I only say this because you've helped a lot of people that I know for actually for a lot of people that I know that you've helped a couple times in the past decade. But one thing I know you do is you give good objective evidence as to why. You don't just say, let's just go with this number, because I'm going to push back if you tell me a number. But if you can give me the evidence and show me the data that says, yeah, that's realistic, like this is the number we need to think about.
yes, so you want to make sure you're running a good comparables, comps. A lot of people are like, what are comps? Well, some houses are easier to compare price on. Then you have those unique homes that are a little bit harder to price because you might be in downtown, which is a very different, like downtown level. And in fact, I'm listing one. It's a very unique property. It's hard to price, and those are hard to price downtown. But what I have too, I've kind of implemented as a pricing team. So if I don't feel, you know, it's always better to have as many eyes on a property as you can before you list it. So I bring in my pricing team, which are 3 or 4 agents that are very high producing and know the area very well, that have been in the business for a long time. We run through all of my listings and we kind of sit down and go over what, the comparisons that they have compared to what I have. And then we sit down and kind of talk about pricing.
So this is like your team that you will just kind of keep yourself checked, make sure that you are utilizing their experience. Because I would imagine when you add their years of experience to yours, we're over 100 years experience in the northern Colorado markets.
Yes.
And
I,
what's interesting, and I'll let you talk here in a minute. What's interesting is these guys don't all even work for the same company, so it's kind of like a network. That's pretty interesting.
yeah, I like to have a network of realtors from different companies because I have a ton of friends in the real estate business. It's important to keep those great relationships, right? Because you write an offer for someone and they're like, "Oh, I like you. You're a great agent to work with." So that's key too. But secondly, I found properties off market before they've gotten listed with just networking with all these different realtors. Like, "Hey, I have this coming up," or "Hey, do you want to go look at this house for a pricing team?" I did that for Megan last week. I looked at one of her listings and ended up, I could tell my client before it even hit the market, like, I know this great property is coming. It might be what you're looking for. So,
So here's the question I have, and it just came to my mind is the NAR settlement changes are coming up. Are you finding that the clients you're talking with are aware of this, and are they bringing it up? And what are they saying? I mean, because in the news you hear things like you don't have to pay, you don't, it's just a lot of what are you hearing out there? Like,
yeah, it was sort of a negative spin, but I feel like in the state of Colorado, we've always disclosed the compensation that buyers get. And when you list a house, I always go in each time with my listing agreement, and it's always pretty cut and dry of, you pay me, my certain amount of my, compensation and what you're going to pay a buyer's agent. It's been brought up, but what I tell people is at the end of the day, you're not going to offer compensation to the buyer's agents that's working really hard on the other end. Your buyer pool shrinks because a lot of the buyers don't have the funds to pay their agent to help represent them. Um, as a seller, you do have more funds because usually you've made a lot of money on the price of your home in Colorado. You bought it 5 years ago. You've, making $200,000-300,000 on it. So it's just in the state of Colorado, I guess it's always been disclosed. It's always been a conversation. You don't have to pay 3%. You can choose to pay 2%, but you want people to come
Yeah.
show your house.
Let's step back for a second here for people who are still a little confused about what the NAR settlement was and how it's changed things. Let's simplify. What did that law do in one or two sentences?
So basically, it said that as a buyer, when you list your house, you don't have to pay a buyer's agent. So
Okay. So
usually,
when I go to when I'm selling my house,
Mhm.
I no longer have to pay the other agent that brings a person to buy my house.
Correct.
And for years it was always accepted that I had to pay the other agent.
So I think in different states now it's a national thing. In different states, sometimes it wasn't disclosed that you were actually paying the buyer's agent. In the state of Colorado, it was always discussed, or it should have been discussed by
Right.
the agent coming in. This is this is how the split. This is how the compensation works for you. So yeah, now they're saying no, you don't have to pay a buyer's agent coming in, which has created this whole other thing where if I go to show you a house, I'm supposed to have the a buyer's agency agreement signed with you before even stepping into that house as well. So, and that's scary too as a buyer coming in. Well, what am I even signing if I'm a first time home buyer? So that's now I have a conversation before I even show properties to someone about this whole situation and actually what you're signing for me to represent you as a buyer.
Okay. So, and that's important, I think. As long as I think if you go over the terms, and you've always been that way, Jess, even before the NAR, I feel like you were always kind of transparent with all those fees and all the way it works. But I think isn't that really the key here is when you're just like with mortgages, um, we are the best mortgage lenders are the ones who are just straight up transparent. Like, don't try to gloss over anything. Don't act like a certain fee is kind of that or kind of that, or it may be that. The key in mortgages, which are very document driven, are be transparent and just be upfront and honest. And if they don't like it now, they're not going to like it later.
And
So
yes,
if you're going to trick them now, which is what a lot of lenders do, if they're tricking you now, you're going to be mad later and they're going to lose the deal anyway. So the best thing to do, upfront, open, honest, and show a bunch of options.
and I think that's too why we work well together, right? You and I, because I'm very transparent and honest and upfront, and I don't, nothing's gray with me. It's black and white, and I will have that conversation, and I'm very honest with all my clients, and that's why I get repeat clients because they know I'm honest and they know I'm working for them the hardest I can with that transparency. So I just think what I tell my clients is cross the bridge when we get there, right? Everything always works out. It's just there's so many different scenarios I can't even nail down.
Yesterday, you mentioned that there was a person you were trying to list their home and they were pushing back saying, I don't want to pay for that other agent because I don't have to anymore per these new NAR rules. So, what do we do when that happens? Like, what are some strategies? I mean, it is what it is. It is the law. You have to follow it. But how can we combat that? Or what are some things that you have found that maybe work when that happens?
Um, I do try to get them to, offer a buyer compensation. It's very important. The buyer's agent works very hard. For instance, I show, gosh, anywhere from, I mean, you might go in and walk in with a buyer and they love the house, you write one offer, one and done. But usually 95% of the time, you're showing several different properties and that buyer's agent's trying to keep the deal together with you. So they're a very important piece of the puzzle. So I do try to negotiate to get them to pay one. If they don't, then we can maybe have the conversation of if someone writes an offer, the buyer can't afford to pay the buyer's agent. What can we do on the backside to help? And that's where maybe you would come in
Yeah.
to offset some of these
Yep.
things so that the buyer can actually pay their agent and still get the mortgage. So,
Yeah. And I have actually experienced that where the cost now that the buyer has all these loan fees and the down payment, and then they also have to pay that realtor fee. Well, that's another $10,000 or whatever that number was. But what we found is that everybody kind of pitches in. What we did was we can work with the mortgage itself and try to find ways to help pay those costs. So if we can help them with, let's say, 10 or 5 grand from the mortgage, well, that's going to obviously save that borrower money, but it's also going to help that realtor out, who most realtors we agree are working their butts off for those buyers. So I mean, I totally see both sides of that.
Just outside looking in, as I do represent both, right? I work as a listing agent and I work as a buyer's agent. And I love working as a buyer's agent. That is one of my, I feel like my biggest, largest strengths because I'm very patient. I'm very, like I said, transparent. People like to work with me because I'm not pushy, but I do work hard. And I just want to let everyone know that most buyer's agents, if you're like me, we're answering our phone constantly. I mean, you know me, I'm writing emails 10, 11 o'clock at night. So it's important to have good representation behind you, which that's the importance of using a buyer's agent and having someone that can help negotiate these transactions are very can be stressful, and I try to take that stress off of most of my buyers. So
And you should, and the key here is you should definitely use a good buyer's agent.
mhm.
You should not just use a buyer's agent, because I think
You
that's a
should be
fallacy.
interviewing them, right? Like you should
Absolutely.
interview them and interview several, and you need to find that person that connects with you and that you feel a connection with as well. Don't,
And if
yeah,
you're paying that kind of money, I think it's up to the buyer's agent show you how and why and what we can save you by using, what are the benefits? If you can't show the benefits, I don't think it's right to, be so pro of your services. I think it goes for lending as well. Don't use my mortgage services if I can't show you why, whether that be a better rate, better service, better loan options, better communication, whatever the words are. Like I can scream at you to use my loans or my lending services, but I really have to prove it. And if I can prove it, I'll win your business now and in the future.
right. And I think that's important is find someone that fits with you but works really hard and has a track record of, working hard and good client reviews and things like that.
Right. Final thoughts, Jess. What do you expect to see moving forward into October, November, and December with the market?
I have a feeling it's going to be still a little bit slower just with the election year, and I think everyone, like I said, is has a little bit of hesitation, and I think maybe that's why we're seeing in 2025 the floodgates will open because everyone that was on the fence, the election's over in 2025, we start over a new leaf. January comes, you know, we start seeing the changes by whatever political parties in the office. So I feel like people are just really waiting for the election to be over and for that stress relief maybe a little bit. And I think 2025 is going to be a lot busier. So
All right. Well, we shall see. Jess, thanks for joining us today. We will be back with you again in October to follow up and just see how things are. Thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate your knowledge.